Welcome back to Off the Pitch, the podcast where we chat with individuals working within and shaping the game of soccer from off the pitch. Today's guest is Ron Patel. Ron is currently serving as the president of USL Championship side New Mexico United. Among a whole host of topics, Ron walked us through his entire career so far, how he ended up being brought in as employee number one of New Mexico United, and if you stick around until the very end, you'll get to hear a heartwarming story that Ron graciously shared with us. Now, it was an absolute pleasure to have on someone who is not only a great businessman, but very clearly an even better person. And what Ron is doing for New Mexico United for the community as a whole is extremely commendable. With all of that being said, this is an episode you will not want to miss. So let's get it started. Okay, Ron. Well, thank you for, sharing some time with us today and being open to coming on the show. Obviously, we have done a bit of digging on yourself as a person and kind of what you stand for, and of course your career. All good things, don't worry, all good things that we saw. But before we get into your career and really dive into soccer, non-soccer, do you want to first share with us and anyone listening who is Ron Patel?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I've listened to a couple of your guys' shows, so really enjoy what you're doing and honored that you'd have me on. So thank you. So who is Ron Patel? I'm just a football fan. I've been a fan of the game since I was a little kid. I remember doing fake commentary on matches in my head, in my room. My dad said he used to walk by my room when we lived in Chester, England, and would hear me commentating on football matches that weren't really going on, but they were going on in my head. So that's who I am. That's who I was when I was 6 years old, and that's who I am right now at 43 years old. And sometimes I have to pinch myself that I get a paycheck to work in football. So was born in England, in Liverpool, about a mile from Anfield. So I'm a Red through and through. Was helped co-found our Liverpool supporters group here in Albuquerque, which now has, I think, close to 500 members. So really proud of that. It's called the 505 Reds. 505 is the area code here. But lived in England till I was 9. My dad moved us across the ocean, which back in 1989 was a big deal, right? There was no internet. There was no Facebook. Long distance calls were way too expensive to call back to family. And it was my mom, my dad, my sister, and I, and that was it. Spent that first Christmas in a Howard Johnson hotel because we didn't have a house yet. This was in Toronto, Canada. Stayed there for a couple years, then moved to the States. Was in upstate New York, Seattle, Washington, back to New York, Syracuse area of New York, and then moved to Phoenix and settled there for a while. Went to high school there. Graduated from Corona del Sol High School in South Tempe, Arizona, and then I went to Arizona State University, where I was a Sun Devil. And I had probably a little too much fun in college, as many students do that go to Arizona State, and didn't actually end up getting my college degree. I left because I started working. Was waiting. I was working 3 jobs in college. I was waiting tables. I was doing a call center, learning how to sell stuff in the daytime, and then I was a doorman at a nightclub in Tempe. And so I found out that the phone sales job, my first ever phone sales job, was actually a scam. I didn't realize that when I started doing it. Since the day I found out it was a scam, I quit. I'm like, this is not good. Like, what we're selling is not what you guys are delivering. So I quit that job. I got more hours at the restaurant. So I was at a Mexican restaurant waiting tables, and I was a doorman a few nights a week at a nightclub. And I did all that so I could afford. My parents were generous to help me with my school, with the in-state tuition at ASU, but I wanted to be in a fraternity. So I had to pay for all that. So I worked my butt off to do that. Then I got a job. I was selling some shoes for a while. Then I was selling cell phones back when we used to use them to talk to people only, before there was text messaging and picture messaging, and found that I was good at that and got offered a management job. So I left school to take that management job. So then did that for a couple of years. That moved me to Albuquerque in 2004. Again, football was always my passion. I never played at a high level, but always played recreationally. I still do to this day at 43 years old. I'm in a 7v7 team with our front office. And moved to Albuquerque, didn't know a single person here, and started just networking with people. I ran a little chain of cell phone stores. And then I saved up the money by '06 to go to achieve what then was my lifelong dream, was to see England play in the World Cup, because I'm a sucker for punishment. I love misery. And so I saved up the money. I went to Germany to see England play Trinidad and Tobago in that World Cup, saved up, paid $700 for the ticket. Back then, I bought it on eBay because there was no StubHub, and it was impossible to buy a ticket if you weren't a resident of the country you wanted to see. And so I bought it for $700. Didn't even know the ticket would work because it had some other guy's name on it, and they said you would have to show your passport to get in. So it was a total risk. And by the time I bought the plane ticket and then the $700 ticket to the game, I couldn't afford a hotel. So I stayed in these fan camps. It was like German farmers were very entrepreneurial, and they would just rent you a tent, a sleeping bag, and a pillow for €7 a day on their farmland. And I'll never forget it. I got in late at night, jet lagged, get to find the place. I felt like I was walking up to a prison because you couldn't see anything. It was like pitch black, and then I saw a light. And I go in and they get me checked in and then into my tent. I wake up the next morning and I was mesmerized. I looked around, there was tents everywhere. And every tent had the person that was staying in it had their country's flag draped over the tent. So you knew where everyone was from. And you start talking to people. I went by myself. I couldn't find any friends back then that would want to go to Europe with me for a World Cup. Football was nowhere near as popular in '06 than it is in the present day. And I didn't have a lot of close friends in Albuquerque because I'd only been here 2 years. And so did it by myself, and it was the greatest thing ever. I met entrepreneurs from all over the world. I met people, I'd say probably the people I enjoyed the most were the Japanese. They were just the coolest people with the Japanese, I think. But I met the Aussies. I met the Scottish who weren't even in the World Cup. They were there to drink, right? The Tartan Army was there just to have a good time. There was some Irish there. There were people from every country in the World Cup, and we would play football in the morning, and they had these little bread trucks. That's before there were food trucks, there were bread trucks in Europe, and you get some bread and some fruit and some water. And pro tip, if you ever go to Germany, if you're hungover, don't take a big chug of water without asking if there's gas in the water, because you have to say no gas, or else they give you carbonated water when you go to drink it right away. Now that caught me off guard when I was having a little too much fun in Germany. So traveled the country and came back from that trip. And long story short, said, you know what? This is not the direction I really wanted to go. I've always wanted to start my own business, and I met entrepreneurs from all walks of life at this tournament. And a couple months later, I called my friend that I went to high school and ASU with in Arizona, and said, we need to start a business. So we started a business together in October of '06. It was called Just Dine In. It was a food delivery service. So before there was Grubhub, Uber Eats, nobody delivered in Albuquerque. There was, you couldn't even get a Chinese restaurant delivered. It was either Papa John's or Domino's. That was it, was pizza. So we said we thought we'd identified a gap in the marketplace, and we did. We did really well at it. So did that for 10 years. Had a very successful run towards the end of it. The first 7 years were really hard. But I really got to learn, I told you I didn't get my college education, but I got a true small business education by running a small business for 10 years. And I really got to learn the consumer base in Albuquerque. Understood what people valued, what people would spend money on, what people would do with their money. And so we sold it in 2015 to Grubhub, who most people have heard of now. They started up, I think, in '08, a couple years after we did, in bigger cities, but they did a strategic acquisition of us. We had then merged with another company, and we were in, I think, 7 markets at the time. And we were in the right place at the right time with the right business that was to be acquired. So that was cool. But in the meantime, soccer was always the passion. And I'd started it was called PDL back then. It's now called USL League Two, a PDL team called the Albuquerque Sol. And that was to take my passion of football and turn it into a business. And I said, you know what? I know how to run a business. This should be fine. Let's do it. Right. And I remember that first season, I realized how much I didn't know about running a soccer team, and even down to the littlest details. You don't know what you don't know, right, when you go into things. And so failed forward for the first couple of years, figuring out how to run a football team, and then said, all right, now I've got to get the hang of it. A couple of years in is when we sold the other business so I could focus on football. And then it became, all right, so how do we take this and make this a pro team? And myself and my partners, we didn't have the net worth or the cash flow at the time to go buy a franchise of a higher level. Because as you know, in the United States, you don't win up like ProRail in Europe. You buy the franchise to get in. And so at the time, the franchise had gone up considerably. And so I went looking for investors. And that took another couple of years, and found the right people. Was connected to Peter Trevisani, who is now our majority owner. We had a 3-hour cup of coffee the first time we met, and went really well. And took about 6 months till we finally decided how we were going to do it. And we recruited the rest of the ownership group. And New Mexico United was born. And the business started on January 8th of 2018. And then we kicked off on March 9th of 2019. So there's the short version, I promise.
Well, we'll make it longer throughout the rest of this call. Before we obviously get into New Mexico United, I think thank you for sharing the story of the World Cup trip, because I
Yeah.
think it's almost very telling. Obviously, we know the different steps you've had, but ever since starting that first business, everything seems very entrepreneurial since then. Even though in some degrees you might not have been the owner of things, but running things, which, brings that entrepreneurial mindset in. And I think taking the risk of buying the eBay ticket, which I don't think many people would do now, is buy a $700 ticket on eBay and trust that it's going to work.
I still
But
have
I
the ticket,
think
by the way. It's framed on my desk.
that's amazing.
I kept it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. But I think even just taking that $700 risk in pursuit of seeing a game and following and chasing passion for the game is it makes a lot of sense now that I've read obviously a lot of articles and interviews that you've done speaking to especially the culture of everywhere you've been in New Mexico, with sort of leading with purpose and passion and impact, and knowing that the income side of things will come. It doesn't need to be the sole focus. It will come if you check all of the actual correct boxes. I think that's very telling. But to take it back to starting Albuquerque Sol, and you mentioned sort of that unknowns, which has been a big trend. We've spoken to a few team founders, and Dan McNally of Cincinnati, who was also employee number one there. So again, might not own it, but was running so much of it, especially in those first days. He was speaking about the exact same scenario. Having a drink and a coffee was where the idea came, and then 6 years later, there's a fully functioning team. So take us back to that day one of thinking about Sol and what those sort of first steps were. You knew you've started a business, but sports is a different beast. So what were those first steps of how do I take this dream and look to actually turn it into a reality?
Yeah, and Dan's a great guy. I went and visited Dan in Cincinnati when we started United and learned from them. And I think you'll see that the more guests you get, the football community is very small and we're very collaborative. We're competitors on the pitch for 90 minutes, but we work as partners off. So yeah, to get the Sol started, I knew that I knew that it was a business and it was a football team. But I didn't know the industry. So I went to the league first and said, what resources do you have available? And they were able to send some stuff over. They had a whole onboarding, I guess you would call it, in person back then for all the new USL2 teams. And so I attended that. It was about a 2-day seminar, different seminars. That was great. And then coming back and trying to put it into practice and to a fruition. And at the time, full disclosure, I was running another business full time. So it didn't have my full time focus, but it had full time of my heart, I would say, of like, how do I get this off the ground? And so, the game of sports is on the business side it's tickets, it's sponsorships. We call them partnerships. So tickets, partnerships, merchandise, and then you've got what we call other revenues. And depending on your situation and where you're at in the totem pole, I guess, of soccer, and if you own your facility and if you don't own your facility is a big difference. Because if you don't own your facility, you're usually challenged to get money for concessions and parking and all those other fees. So we didn't have the facility. We couldn't charge for parking. We really couldn't make any money off concessions. So we knew it was going to be ticketing, partnerships, and merchandise. Merchandise has a high cost, right? It costs a lot of money to produce a piece of clothing, and you have to buy a lot of inventory and hope that you sell it all to make your profit. So we knew that was risky. So we did some merch, but we focused on tickets and partnerships. And partnerships was probably the most natural thing for me because it was B2B sales. It was selling to other businesses. And so I remember we got our first front of jersey sponsor was a insurance company. So an insurance broker here in Albuquerque. And it was a $10,000 sponsorship that we were asking for. And we had someone else offer us a $10,000 sponsorship for something else, not for the jersey. And I said to the jersey sponsor, look, I've got the same amount, but I'd I've got to make sure that the jersey, I don't know why, I just made this up on the spot, I think. I've got to make this sure this jersey sponsorship is more expensive than the other sponsorship. So I need you to pay me $10,001. And we literally met for a drink the next week at a bar, and the guy was I think it was the vodka martini was his drink, and so we had a couple vodka martinis, and he brought a check made out for $10,001 for the front of jersey sponsorship. And we were an Adidas club for the Albuquerque Sol, and so we had a yellow jersey and a red jersey with that on. But I'll never forget that, getting that first check. Which, by the way, the other sponsor that promised the 10,000 never signed the contract and never came through, so I never got that one. So I earned the extra dollar, I guess, in the sponsorship on that first one. But so the sponsorship part was all right, selling to businesses. The hard part, which I've learned as now I've been in sports for almost 10 years, the hardest part is selling tickets, because it's a lot of transactions that you need to have. But if you treat it like a transaction, you're not going to get far. We treat fans like family. We don't call them customers, they're fans. And so you have to make sure that you're reaching out to as many people as possible genuinely, and giving them motivation to come out and spend their time, which is more valuable than money, and time of 2 hours coming out on sometimes a Wednesday night, right? To come see a football match. So that was the hardest thing, was how do we go sell these tickets? And because it was a part-time venture for me at the time, we couldn't afford to have sales reps. And so it was really a case of putting stuff out there and hoping people would buy. Now, sometimes you go get a company to bring someone out, and that was great. But then this is all we knew at the time, right? This is all we knew. We knew we couldn't afford sales reps, so this is what we could do. As we progressed, and then as I got to the USL Championship and we started United, we were able to bring on full-time salespeople. Then I was able to put my experience of sales and managing salespeople into play. And now, I'm very proud of the sales culture we have. Even though at New Mexico United, we are a mission-based club, but what I always tell people, without a viable business, there's no platform to perform the mission. Right? You've got to have a viable business, because if the owners don't want to fund the club anymore, then you don't have anything to fulfill. There's no mission to fulfill because there's no business. So you've got to find that balance between how do you make sure it's a viable business, but also fulfilling a mission without making it feel like it's all about the money, because it's not all about the money, but the money is necessary for it to be viable. So hope that makes sense.
Back then, anyone starting a soccer club, professional or semi-professional, if they were going into it thinking this is what's going to make them rich or richer, I think they would only have been fooling themselves. And hence,
and you had to have a certain level of craziness about you too, because it's a lot. I mean, you guys have lived it too, right? So it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, in most countries, you just see it as, a pocket that just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And it doesn't ever really flow out of that pocket. But that's awesome. Thank you for sharing those steps. I know you mentioned unknowns, which has been a common trend of the unknown unknowns that come along with building a club. What were some of the most surprising ones, I guess, that just completely caught you off guard that you didn't have to deal with in the prior business you built?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably two levels of answers to that. One for the Soul and then one for United, because they're, completely different businesses, even though they're both football teams. So for the Soul, it was just the little things, the expenses. I always joke about the athletic tape. I never realized how much athletic tape players go through, and I never realized how big of a line item that would be on the expense budget. And I thought, all right, we'll have some athletic tape and that'll do the year. No, you had to rebuy that stuff like 30 times. I didn't realize how much money went into travel. When you're traveling people, we're in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We never had a game in our state that wasn't a home game. Every away game was out of state. And we're the 5th largest state, by the way, in the United States by area. And there's no games in our state. So our shortest road trip was a 6-hour drive, which was Tucson, which was our rival. But then we were driving to Denver, which was 6 or 7. We were driving to Salt Lake, which was 11 or 12. I remember some years we had Laredo, Texas, which was 16 hours. Springfield, Missouri was 16 hours. Oklahoma City was 8 hours. It was never a close game. And so I maxed out a few credit cards. My wife not happy with me during those times, I'll tell you that. And I remember maxing out cards. I couldn't go on the trips. One of my partners, Larry, would go on the trips. His dad would drive one of the vans, and he would drive the other van. And here's a good story for a good lower league, lower level soccer story. We're getting close to maxing out my next credit card to get the team to, I think it was Laredo they were going, and they're running out of money. But we figured out how do we feed the team what they need. And we were told by this nutritionist, hey, after the game, you need like rice, vegetables, chicken or good protein and a brown sauce. That's great for a recovery meal. And so Larry was going to buy like trays of rice and vegetables from a Chinese restaurant with the sauce, while his dad went to Costco and would buy the rotisserie chickens. And then his dad would debone the rotisserie chickens in the bathroom of their crappy hotel that they were staying. I think it was a Motel 6 or something. And so they're deboning the chickens and combining it with the chicken with the vegetables and the rice and the brown sauce. Because we were running out of money, but we had to feed these athletes and make them feel like they were appreciated, which they were, but there was only so much money left on the credit card. And so God bless Larry Espinoza. He did so many of those things to keep that team going and make a trip. I remember buying snacks from a Walmart in Laredo, and they would go and they would buy just these big things of snacks. It would be like bananas, Nutella, peanut butter, and bread. He's like, that would keep the guys happy. He's like, and he'd keep one hotel room. He would keep the door cracked so all night guys would come in and different times and grab snacks and stuff. And that was just how you kept going. So unknowns were the travel. There was the athletic tape and the athletic supplies to keep things going. And I guess the third one would be how hard it is to sell a ticket. It sounds pretty simple, but when you're an underfunded business and people don't know about you, yeah, the people around you know about you and all your friends and family are going to encourage you and tell you how great it is what you're doing. But until you get out of that bubble, then you realize how hard it is to sell a ticket. And tickets drive the rest of the business. Without the tickets, you can't sell the merchandise. You can't sell the food. You don't have cars to park. And you can't tell a sponsorship if there's no people in the stands. So tickets really drive the whole business. So if there's people listening that are going to start a team, the number one focus you need to make is how do you sell tickets in order to make everything else viable. So
definitely. I mean, that is a crucial point to make, that assuming you can do anything without butts in seats and fans wanting to support the mission, everything else is reliant on that. And those minor league, lower league horror stories, I'm sure are everywhere, of running out of money.
And I'm not embarrassed to tell them because everyone that's been in the game has been through that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, we definitely started Bay Cities. It sounded like you just described, our entire situation, which I'm sure is the case for several teams every year at, all of the lower leagues, of just trying to figure it out and just.
I remember telling the coach, I'm like, can you just ask them to just tape up a little less during training? Like, they just don't tape up during training and go a little lighter on them. So.
The athletic tape was drowning the bank account.
It was.
That's great. And then, so obviously you had that experience with the Soul and seeing things at, a much lower level years ago, when it was even lower in terms of, sort of, I guess, financial trajectories and hitting profit and breaking even. Fast forward to New Mexico, you get another crack at it to start from the beginning. What, from your time with the Soul, did you lean into knowing that you could tackle ahead of starting New Mexico? And again, what were some of the new unknowns with that step up to a higher level where budgets are higher, there's higher expectations, logistics are greater? What were some of those new unknowns that caught you off guard the second time around?
Yeah, I mean, look, budgets were higher, but that just means expenses are higher, which means you have to sell more stuff to pay for it, right? So although the budgets are higher, it sounds like that's more of an opportunity. It's actually more pressure, because now you have to go find that money to pay for that. And so so back to the question, like what would transfer over? I think the Soul provided a great foundation for New Mexico United. I don't think United would exist if the Soul wasn't there, but I don't think the Soul is the only thing to credit for United's success. There's a lot of things to credit for United's success early on. We're only in our 6th year, but I think we've had some success. There's still a lot ahead of us. But I think it provided a good foundation. It got the soccer community excited. It wasn't easy, like I said, and by the time we got to the 5th year, finally it was like, all right, I think we're in a really good place now, and people are really starting to see this. And we were playing at a high school, because it wasn't a field in Albuquerque I could rent. This was the Sol days, of course. It wasn't a field in Albuquerque I'd rent that had grass, bleachers, and lights. And so we would rent those 30-foot parking lot lights you see in construction sites. We rent 10 of those to light the field because you couldn't sell tickets to a game in the afternoon in the summer in Albuquerque. It's 110 degrees. So poor players would go pick up the ball to do a throw in and be inhaling diesel fumes when they, when they go to pick up the ball. And so it cost us like $4,000 just to light the field for a game. And that was for one game. So it was a lot. I could go on all day about these stories of how we, put it together, but we were selling 700 tickets to a game at a high school with parking lot lights on the wrong side of town, by the way, the side of town in Albuquerque where 20% of the population is, not 80%. And then we got a couple games we were able to play at UNM's facility, which is a proper, football facility, seated, I think 6,000, and it's where the Lobos soccer team, the university plays. And all of a sudden we were selling 3,000 seats. And that's when it was like, okay, we're on to something now. And so we were able to build that foundation when we translated to United. But then from there, it was I had some of the sponsors we had with the Sol ended up sponsoring United as well. Some of the season ticket holders came over as well. But again, we only had I think we had 200 season ticket holders with the Sol. With United today, we have 4,200. So it's a big, big step up. And so the things that were unknown when I got to the Sol was really just that consistent effort in selling tickets, first of all. But then with the corporate partnerships, it's no longer about buying a sign for a few $1,000s. The average corporate partnership in the USL, I think, is about $40,000 or $50,000. So you've got to be able to show a really good product. And now you're selling something that's just air. Like, yeah, we're going to play this game at a baseball field. And they're already confused when I tell them that. Yeah, we're going to convert the baseball field to soccer, and it's going to be great, trust me. And you're going to now give me $50,000. Now that's really hard to do, right? Because you're selling something that doesn't exist yet. And so we did a lot of it with storytelling. We told a lot of stories about the U.S. Open Cup and how there's by the way, there's a AAA baseball team in Albuquerque, the stadium we play in, called the Albuquerque Isotopes. So we would tell people, and I'll quote Peter, our owner, because me and him would go into these meetings together, and we'd imagine if the Brooklyn Italians could play the Boston Firefighters, and imagine if the Albuquerque Isotopes could play the New York Yankees in a meaningful game. That's what this tournament is. And we get the opportunity to go up, and it's the best team in America will be crowned, and the winner goes on to the CONCACAF Champions League. And if you win that, you go to the FIFA Club World Cup, and you could be playing Real Madrid and Liverpool. How cool is that? New Mexico now has an opportunity to go that way. Now, am I saying we're going to do that? No. We'll probably make more money off the Disney movie if we do it. But you know what? We have that opportunity now. We never had that opportunity before. So that's really what we had said we were selling, right? We were selling the opportunity to go forward. And now New Mexico, which is often a state that's overlooked, that's dogged on, that people always tell us, you're not good enough and you're top of the bad list and bottom of the good. Now we can be up there with all these other places. And we told that story of the Open Cup, and we told the story of the USL and how it was rising and how the USL Championship was becoming a stronger and stronger league. And never did we imagine that first year, by the way, we'd make a run to the Open Cup quarterfinals and knock off 2 MLS teams on the way. You couldn't have scripted that any better. Not to mention our first ever game. The first goal was scored by Devin Sandoval, who went to El Dorado High School in Albuquerque, played for the University of New Mexico, and 2 other people involved in that goal were born in New Mexico. So the rest of the team was from the rest of the world. And somehow 3 of the 4 New Mexicans on the team linked up to score that first ever goal. So I think there's definitely an element of luck you have to have in business, but man, you make your own luck. And you make it by working hard, by coming in every day with passionate people, spreading a passionate message, delivering on your mission, delivering on your core values, and obviously you got to be cognizant to your business as well at the same time. So really understanding what all that was, you can't understand that until you live it. And so I think one of the biggest unknowns coming in was the grind, and knowing that every single day we showed up saying, how are we going to get this across the line today? We took an approach that's used by most teams. We came out, we announced we were going to have a team. This was June of 2018. And that gave us a runway till the following March. I don't think it was long enough. Anyone else starting up, if you start in June, I would wait till the 2 years later, not the next year. I think you just need the time to sell, to need that runway. So we announced in June. We put out that we were going to play in the USL, so our logo said USL New Mexico. That was our logo, and we're going to name the team later, but place a $25 season ticket deposit, and it'll go towards season tickets. I don't know how much they're going to be, and we're going to play in a baseball stadium, but trust me, it's going to be great. Give us your $25. 606 people did it from May to October. And in October, we had our brand release party, and we introduced our crest, and we did it at a location downtown. We got an iconic picture that you can find online of 600 people holding up their scarves in the air when we released the black and yellow colors. And we started converting those deposits into full season tickets. And that first year we got to about 3,300 season tickets by the time we kicked off. But we got to like Christmas that year and it was panic mode. I mean, we were trying to figure out how do we get to 6,000 tickets sold per game? That was the big number. And we looked at the league, and back then the league average was less than 4,000. And we said, okay, well, maybe we're a bigger market. And then we had another oh crap moment because we realized we were the second smallest market in the league. We said, how the heck are we going to get to 6,000? And I'll quote Peter. He goes, you know what? And he's a finance guy. He ran a finance company and finance firm for 20 years. And he goes, sometimes you just have to ignore the data. It feels right. And if it does feel right, you just got to say yes and not focus on the reasons to say no. And we joke about that, but we're actually kind of serious. Like sometimes if you don't focus on the reasons to say no and you focus on the reasons to say yes, incredible things can happen. And so we went, full force after that. Let's go. How do we get to 6,000? How do we get to 6,000? By Christmas, I think we had 1,700 seats sold for opening day. And we were like, oh crap, we're 3 months away. Well, somehow through will and hard work and passion and grit, we get to that first day, 12,000 people showed up to that first game. And then we said, how do we top that? Like, we can't let it dry. I want to just say that was a fluke, right? And you got it. And our second game was on a Wednesday night. The whole week, there's thunderstorms. It's raining. Nobody's buying tickets to a game when it's raining, right? I think we got 8,000 tickets sold, which was better than our 6,000. But we're like, God, everyone's going to think this is a fluke now, right? So we won that game. That was our first ever win. And then we put it all into match 3. And match 3, we did a partnership with the school system. APS, Albuquerque Public Schools. They ended up selling like 1,200 tickets through a ticket link we gave to them. It was awesome. And then boom, 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 we had 11,000 again. We didn't have another match that year with less than 10,000 people. We averaged 12,700 fans a game that first year. And we only had a front office of 12 people. It was insane. Today, by the way, we have a front office of about 40. And we're still not selling the amount of tickets we were in that first year. So I mean, that tells you something. A lot of credit needs to be given to that front office. But really what I think makes New Mexico United what it is the people of New Mexico. And we've built this club for them. We've built this club. They are our bosses. Peter, yes, signs my paycheck, but I tell every new employee that comes into the company, they have an orientation 1 hour with me on their first day. And I tell them who our bosses are. We actually have a PowerPoint presentation of about 7 different fans and the stories that they've shared with us about how the club has changed their life in a positive way. And those are the people that we work for. And every new employee goes through that. Every new intern goes through that on the first day. And that way we set the right barometer. This is how we manage this club. And so I'll always go back to, yes, it's a business. And yes, you have to sell tickets. But at the same time, we got to remember who we work for. And it's the people of New Mexico. And those are the people that really do sign our paychecks. Because without them, we won't have a club. So
that's perfect. Because one of the things that I noticed when I was reading about New Mexico, and obviously that I've seen through watching some of the games this season, is the fan culture. And obviously you guys have the Curse, the supporter group as well. But one of the things that it seems like you guys focus on is the fan culture and fan experience. Was that something from the beginning? Like, was that an idea from the start? You guys wanted to basically seep the club's DNA in that sort of thing? And I guess a second part is, did that kind of come from your past and your fanaticism for the sport?
I can't take credit for it. I was one of the people in the room, yes. And I grew up in the Cop when it was standing room, in Liverpool before Hillsborough. So I grew up in that environment. So I knew supporters are the DNA of the club. Even with the Albuquerque Sol, we had a small supporters group called the Sandianistas. Don't mishear the word there. Sandia is the Sandia mountain range, which is in New Mexico. It was the Sandianistas, and they would sit behind the goal most games, 6 or 8 of them, banging on buckets And one, after a couple of years, they invested in a drum, and they had a drum and some buckets and some flags and some horns. And they, there was no seating back there. They would just stand back there because it was a high school. They just had the bleachers on the side, and they would stand back there. And I just saw the passion they had for the club. And some games there were three of them. I mean, that was it. But you know what? You don't focus on the ones that aren't there. You focus on the ones that are there. And I would go up to them and thank them, and I'd grab beers with them sometimes, before a big game the night before, not the day of the game because it was too much work. But I mean, those people just pour their heart and soul into the club. And you mentioned the Curse. They are the largest supporters group we have. We actually have 7 supporters groups now. The Curse is one of 7. The Curse is the largest still, but we have 7 different groups. And so what these folks do to prepare for a home match is unbelievable. So while we're working hard in the front office and trying to sell tickets and do the things we're doing, they are working hard to set the atmosphere. And for those that are looking at the business side of sports, what I'll tell you is your supporters section ticket is always the lowest price ticket in the stadium. So for us, you can get a supporters section ticket for $19. Our ticket prices will go up from there. So when you look at it on paper, you're like, why should I spend time and effort on a $19 ticket, right? When I could be selling 25, 35, whatever market you're in, maybe $50, $75 tickets. But let me tell you, those people that buy those $19 tickets are worth probably 4 times that ticket price on a per person basis because of the atmosphere they set for the stadium. So nothing is ever really black and white, I think, in football, because the supporters culture is truly different. And when I look at other sports, I guess you could say in American football, the Oakland Raiders used to have the black hole, right? That was like their supporters section. But I don't know of other sports that have the influence from a group of people like a supporters section influences a football match. And again, I'm raised in Liverpool, the Cop, unbelievable. When you sing You'll Never Walk Alone, I went back about 7 years ago and did it again. I was crying when I was doing it because it means that much to so many people. And when people go into the football business, if you underestimate how powerful the supporters can be, you're going to be in for like a rude surprise because they really will drive the club forward. So,
absolutely. I mean, you see it everywhere, especially in Europe, and obviously you can see the inspiration that has come from being a Liverpool fan and being in one of the the best stadiums in the world. To see for the first experience of that, it's sort of it's tough to top it when that's your first experience. When it comes to crafting that culture, and the initial fans getting in, was there any element, because we've spoken to other COOs that are very tight with the fans as well, and ownership, was there any, what did the collaboration look like in the early days of you want to be a part of this, the fan groups, the leaders of the fan groups, they want to be a part of this? What does that collaboration look like of you being able to support them and not just expect it to be there, because it does have to be, to your point, a joint effort?
Great question. I'm glad you asked it, because you do not want to try to control them, because that's not the way this relationship is supposed to be. They are their own entity, or in our case, entities. And most of them have their own independent nonprofit status. And so the way we started it was when we started doing those season ticket deposits back in June of 2018, we had a little checkbox that they filled out after they made their deposit. If you're interested in being as part of Supporters Club, check this box. Boom. So I think after the first month, we had 6 people check the box. We emailed them all, said, hey, we want to buy you a beer. Come on out. We went to a brewery. We sat down with the 6 of them. We bought the first round. We said, look, the 6 of you checked the box. We're going to get out of it. There's the first beer. Have fun. And we left the room. And that's how the Curse started. And so leadership is important. And so the Curse, there was a gentleman named David Weesey Carl, who started as the first president of the Curse. And he put in just as much time to the Curse as he did to his day job, probably more. And so we always joke about that first year, because David actually now works for our club. And we joked that first year he still worked for us just on a volunteer basis, because he was in the office so much just interacting with us. But at the same time, we never told him what he had to do, what he could do, what he couldn't do. We just said, look, here's what we'd like to achieve. We want to do this with you. What do you guys need? We'll support you. But it was never here's the rules and this is how you do it. There's certain things like, smoke bombs and stuff. You have to have certain rules and regulations for the stadium. They totally get that. But it was about just providing a platform for them to be successful. And they were trying to get 50 paid members. They charged $25 for membership. That first year, they got 550 paid members. It was insane. Our supporters section is about 1,000 people. There was never an empty seat. And still to this day, there's rarely one. I think, the last couple of games in the heat, we've had some no shows and there's been a few empty seats, but you can't really tell the passion that comes out of there. So I think just the relationship is give, give, give. Don't really take. Give some more, but understand that there are certain lines they can't cross in terms of you can't just start doing random things like with smoke. There's certain things the fire marshal has to make sure that we stay in. But outside of that, it's their platform because it's their club, right? And it has to feel that way because it is that way. And if it doesn't and it tries to be governed by the club, it's just not going to work. But every game, after the game, win, draw, or lose, our players, it's in their deal with us. They have to stay around, sign autographs, take pictures. So every player will go by the front row of the supporter section fan so they can come down to the front, get autographs, get pictures. One of our supporters groups called the Black Diamonds. They give a man of the match every game, and it's a Black Diamond scarf that they give to the man of the match, and they take a picture and they signs it and everything. And then different groups have different traditions. We've got one that's called Sector 114, which is like bikers. They don't want to be in the supporter section, but the section right next to it is 114. So, and they all made like black and yellow biker jackets that they all wear together. And they've given it to our owner and David. So we have David in charge of our fan engagement because he was the leader of the curse. He's now the person that deals with all of our supporters groups. And then I think the biggest thing is listening, right? Not just dictating, not just telling them this is what you can do, go have fun, but also listening to them. So we'll bring them into our office a few times a year, and we'll have representation from each supporters group, usually 1 to 2 people, and then listen. What can we do better? What do you guys want to see? What do you need? What do you want? Obviously, when you're winning games, you don't get as much negative feedback. When you're losing games, you do get more. That just comes with the territory. However, we're always striving to get better, and again, they are our club. So what can we do to serve you guys better? They'll come in our office. They'll tell us. Can't always do every request, right? We'll try, but we'll try to satisfy as many requests as they ask for. So
I think it's very clear to see how you and Jeremy Allenbo get on so well, because he said so much of the same of what he was doing, especially at Chattanooga. Where he really was leading things for probably the longest in the front office side of things. That exact same, we don't want to talk to you, we want to hear from you, and exactly same for him. It was over a beer. the great connector of the world. So it sounds like you guys have obviously done a fantastic job of harnessing that interest and that passion. And despite never being to New Mexico or Albuquerque, I can almost paint just how proud the people from the area are of being from there and wanting to come together to be part of something bigger than themselves and put the area on the map. Because I guess to your point of New Mexico, you're being the only team in the state. They don't maybe have a lot around them to come together and root for. So how much of was it kind of just the timing of capitalizing on what seemed like a very ripe market, despite you highlighting that it was the second smallest market? It seems like it must have just been extremely ripe for something to bring the area together as a vehicle, to have this family bond, versus having to actually craft that and go out there and proactively force that to come together.
I'm trying to think of a good analogy and it's not coming to me. So when it does come to me, I'll bring it up. But I wouldn't say that it was a ripe market because everyone told us we were crazy. Everyone told us it won't work. And I think one thing that New Mexico United has done well is we've taken what other people perceive as disadvantages and we've used them to our advantage. And so there's a graveyard of sports teams that have come and gone from New Mexico. And the main reason was not because they were bad business people, not because they were bad teams. They were probably underfunded in a market that's very difficult. If you look at any, list on, income or education, you'll usually find New Mexico nowhere up here. You'll find us all the way down there. And if you look at homelessness and addiction and a lot of these negative lists, you'll find us way up there. And when that message is beaten into your head so many times, you start to like think differently of yourself. And that's what New Mexico kind of has, a self identity of that. And so I wouldn't call it a ripe market, because it's not like, oh, look at that soil. Let's plant some seeds there and it's going to grow and be beautiful. One of the things, going back to one of your earlier questions, what did we not really understand going into it that we did later, I think, was that intense pride that people have for New Mexico. Because we're told so often we're not good enough, because we're told so often you don't deserve the nice things that other people have, you become to believe that. But what New Mexico United's been able to do is, even if it's just for 90 minutes, like that mask of negativity and complacency is completely removed. And the pride of New Mexico shines through. And people just love when you come to a game. And whenever we have a new vendor that wants us to change who we're buying something from, and a lot of time with our merchandise, we just did this with a merchandise vendor called Sportique. They're based in Phoenix. They make really good products. They work with the NBA. They work with a lot of other teams. They work with some USL teams. I said, look, you've sent us some designs. They're okay. You need to understand us. And the only way to do that is to come to a game. And so he came to a game. When he was leaving, he's like, I totally get it now. He's like, there's no way I could do designs for this club without seeing and feeling exactly what this was. Because the people of New Mexico, I remember we went to Minnesota in 2019 for the Open Cup quarterfinal. We chartered a 737. We had 180 New Mexicans go on a Wednesday to a quarterfinal, landed in Minnesota. People at the stadium were like, I didn't even know what a New Mexican looked like. And our owner, Peter, goes, that's okay. He's like, none of us look alike. We're a very culturally diverse state. There's people from every walk of life, but we're one kind of big family, and everyone is joined. And if you're from a big family, you know how it is. There's a lot of fighting. Everyone fights together, but someone from the outside picks a fight, everyone turns around and gangs up on that person, right? That's how it is in New Mexico. Like, we can point and prod each other all you want, but you want to come from the outside and pick on us, we're going to turn right on you right away, and you're in trouble. And it kind of reminded me just now of when we were talking about the curse. The name, the curse. I don't know if if you did the research on the name.
Yeah.
No, I have not seen it.
Legend has it, and I think it's true. There's a thing called the Curse of Lew Wallace. And Lew Wallace was the original governor of the territory of New Mexico. And there was a letter he wrote back to his wife on the East Coast, saying that, look, he couldn't understand how hard it was here. The altitude, people don't realize we're the same altitude as Denver. We're the high desert. So we get snow in the winter. And people just think we're desert, so we're really hot all the time. It's not the case. So we're high desert. And so there's the altitude. The soil is not great here. You can't grow a lot of stuff here. And then the wind and the rain and the storms, it'll change like that on a dime. And Lew Wallace wrote back, he's like, based on my calculations, all things that work elsewhere fail in New Mexico. And people call that the curse of Lew Wallace. And they say that New Mexico has been doomed ever since Lew Wallace wrote that letter. And so the curse, the supporters group said, you know what, we're going to take that and make it our own, because your tactics may work in Orange County. Your tactics may work in Pittsburgh, but gosh, you bring it to New Mexico, we're going to turn it on its head and we're going to beat you. And so I think that just goes to show that it's a different place. There's a lot of people here that have not traveled much outside of the state of New Mexico. It's an insular state. When we went to Minnesota, that was some people's first time ever on an airplane. And they chose that trip to go on an airplane for the first time on that. So there hasn't been a lot of things that are big rallying points for our state. And I'm not saying we're the only thing and we're the best thing. I'm just saying I think we've done it well. I think, the company that's on the front of our jersey has done it incredibly well as well. Meow Wolf. If you haven't seen it, go Google it. It started in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is only 85,000 people. It's now in Las Vegas, Denver, Dallas, Houston, coming to more cities very soon. Los Angeles, I think, is next. An incredible business that started right here in New Mexico. So there's a pride that people have for this place and for our people. And I invite you both to come to a match. We'll roll out the black and yellow carpet for you, and you'll see it, you'll feel it. And there's a palpable electricity in the stadium. And look, we've all been to football matches and we say it's fun to go. There's nothing like a New Mexico United home game. I know you think I'm biased, but I'm promising you, it really is something different. When the pride of these people that haven't had a lot of things to be proud about comes together, it's really good. And I think that's the reason we do sell so much of our merch. We've led the league in merch sales every single year of our existence. And that's in a place that has no money, no education, right? There's not one Fortune 500 company that's based in New Mexico. So how the heck, and we don't sell our stuff. And this is a $90 jersey. I think it's a fair price, but it's not like we're selling them for $30. It's something where people are so proud. Yes, I think we create nice stuff, but it's more about the reason why people buy them and the reason why this crest means so much to the people here as to the reason why those merch sales are so high. So.
Well, we will definitely take you up on that offer to come and see it in person, because if it's anything like I'm currently picturing in my head, just based on what you're saying, then I'm sure it'll be much even greater than that. It sounds like a fantastic time.
Thank you. By the way, that offer goes to anyone listening that's starting a club, that works for a club. I told you I went to go visit Dan in Cincinnati. They opened their doors to us. We pay it forward as well. And we've had many visitors from different clubs that are starting, that have existed already. We learn from others. Others learn from us. It's a two-way street. So
excellent. Love that. So the culture you're developing is tremendous sounding, so completely kudos to everything that's been going on from the beginning. And it sounds very intentional from the beginning that this was, the core of the plan. And as I said at the beginning, everything else will naturally follow if you do it correctly. When it comes to bringing new people into the business, now that it's growing, it's continuing to succeed, setting aside, technical expertise, relevant background, and you're bringing someone in, what traits in a person are you looking for to make sure that they can harness this purpose-driven movement and not, bring any toxicity to it or try and change it?
To my players or staff?
Both.
So with staff, it's two words that we look for: New Mexican. That's all we need. We've tried hiring from the outside, and not that those weren't great people, but they really don't get New Mexico the way that New Mexicans do. So I'd much rather take someone that's brand new, that has no sales experience or no merchandise experience or whatever department they come in, and train them up, than take someone that has done it elsewhere. You try to sell tickets here the way that you sell tickets in Philadelphia, it's not going to work well. It's not going to go well. It takes someone that's passionate about New Mexico and genuinely passionate, because that's the thing I've learned is, consumers in general, but really soccer fans, you can't BS a soccer fan. Like, they know if you're being genuine or not. And if you're disingenuous, they'll see right through you. And so if you've got someone trying to sell something that's disingenuous about the passion we have for New Mexico, it's not going to work. It's not going to work in our culture. So pretty much everyone that's in a non-high level skilled position, right, is from New Mexico. Now, there's certain things, legal, accounting, human resources, there's certain things you kind of have to make sure they have the right technical expertise, obviously. But for most of the positions in the front office, it's New Mexican is the first thing we look for. We do use a couple tools though now too. It's one called the Culture Index, which looks at personality traits and things like that. We have an ideal profile like for that position, and then when they apply, they'll fill out a survey. We'll see if they've got the right kind of profile, and then that'll advance them in the interview process. And then when it comes to the players, we love having New Mexican players on the roster. We're only, I told you, the fifth largest state by area. We only have 2 million people though in this entire state, and about 1 million of them are in the Albuquerque metro area. So you got half the state in this little area, and then everyone else is spread out. I remember, sorry, a little sidebar story. When we started the club, we did that announcement in June of 2018. I sent a postcard out to the mayor of every town in New Mexico, and I bought the list. There were 63 towns, villages, whatever, with less than 5,000 people living in it. And I remember I did follow-up calls too to every one of them. And there were guys that would answer the phone while they're on their ranch feeding their chickens, because they were the mayor of that little town, but they don't have an office. They're running their ranch, and they're the mayor of that little town. And that just opened my eyes too. When we started, we would travel around the state, because it's a big, I guess, I can't believe I haven't covered this yet, but we are New Mexico United, not Albuquerque United. Yes, we're based in New Mexico, but we activate 3 hours away that way. We just took supplies down to the fire victims in Ruidoso, which is 3 hours that way. I mean, we go all around the entire state, but yeah, I'll never forget that. Just talking to some of these mayors of towns from all over the state, that some of them are in less than 5,000 people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And especially bringing in staff that are going to help push forward the culture and the identity that you guys have cultivated from the start. that I think is a crucial piece. Now, we know for a fact that you have all of those things going for you already, because you were the one who instilled them and helped build them from the ground up. One of the things I feel like we may have missed with a few of our previous guests is, what do you do like on a day-to-day basis, especially since this is kind of the target market is kind of your fans and your fan group. I think they would also like the insight, but just like on what the day-to-day looks like for you during the in season, especially this season, considering how well everything's going, and on top of that, the off season, and then what that looks like as well to prepare.
Yeah. So today's a day off, and it's my fourth meeting, so that's that's how my day looks. But so you're talking about my role as president, what my day to day is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So good question. So what's one of the things that's been harder for me is now in this role, I can no longer be the doer. I have to be the kind of the implementer and the coach and the mentor, but I can't always do, I always want to do everything. I always want to do everything. So it's been a hard step for me to take a step back and say, all right, I can't be at every event. Like there's an event tomorrow night that I just want to go just so I can show my face there. But I can't. I have a 10-month-old at home too, so I can't be at every event and do everything and still be the husband and father I need to be at home. But what my day to day looks like is it's a lot of meetings. I report to my calendar after my wife, of course, but I report to my calendar, and it's we do a leadership meeting twice a month, so every other week. We have a leadership meeting. So our leadership department is the heads of each department. So there's accounting, ticketing, corporate partnerships, merchandise, community, which is one of our departments, which David leads, and community. I'm forgetting one. Shame on me, I'm forgetting one. But we have each of the department heads in that every 2 weeks. Weekly, we have a sales and marketing meeting that I sit in on. So that makes sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. So that the marketing department that's creating all the content, which we have, but we don't work with an agency, everything's done in-house. So we have 7 people on our marketing team that are creating the videos, the beautiful graphic designs, the photos, the social media management, all done in that department, and the storytelling. And so we have that's the one I forgot was creative. So our creative director's in there too. And so we have a sales and marketing meeting that the marketing team is talking with the sales team to make sure, all right, when are season tickets going on sale for next year? When are playoff tickets going on sale? When is the launch for this? When is this? When is that? When is this? We have our foundation that's doing a big gala coming up in September. So let's support them by sharing some of that on our social media. So we have that. Also weekly, I've got one-on-ones with various leaders. I've got every Thursday I got to do our accounts payable. So it's sent to me by our accountant, our controller, sorry. And this is all the bills that are going out the door. And I got to go through each one of them and, okay, that looks funny. Let me see that invoice. Why are we paying so much to that vendor for this? And on a given week, that could be 40 checks, most of them are electronic payments, but 40, that could be 140. Just depends on the time of the year and what the cash flows are like. So staying in touch with the finances. It's always great to see people in the stands, but you got to go back and make sure the numbers match up to what we're supposed to be selling. Let's see what else. Just really being present and making sure that each person in the front office knows that I appreciate what they're doing. I've done pretty much every one of their jobs. I've never been a graphic designer because you don't want me to be. So the creative is probably the one department where the graphic design and the videography I'm not very good at. But I ran the social media for the Soul when I did it. I did everything, right? I've sold tickets. I've sold sponsorships. I still sell tickets and sponsorships sometimes for fun. I'll jump on the phones and do a call campaign. No problem at all. I've done P&Ls. I've done a lot of the accounting work. I've had to do some of the HR work. I've done pretty much every job in that office. So going around, like I understand what their job duties are. And so it's letting them know, because there's nothing worse than having a boss that you're like, does he even know what I do? Does he even care about what I do? Right. And I think, motivation for employees is so key now. It used to be how much do you pay? And that's it. Now, yes, you have to be competitive with pay, but you have to be competitive with appreciation. And it has to be genuine as well, because your employees will see right through you. And so I hope my employees feel that I do appreciate each and every one of them. When we ran the club that first year, I told you there was 12 people in the front office. Our game day, I haven't got to game day yet, but our game day would start at 8 in the morning and go till about 1 a.m. that night. We play in a baseball stadium, so everything had to be brought in: goals, benches, signs, you name it, brought in. And then as soon as the game's over, it's got to get undone and moved out. And so the game days were extremely long. So that's kind of like my day to day on a non-game day. Oh, I forgot about the merch meeting. We have a weekly merch meeting too, so we're going through that. And then on game weeks, like this last week was 2 game days. We had a Wednesday and a Saturday. So we'll have game day production meetings. So it's like everything that's going to go on during that game day, from the who's going to sing the national anthem to what's going up on the video board to who's doing the color guard to what's the theme of the night. Is there a giveaway when you come in? Is there a special t-shirt for that match? And we have everyone in that meeting. That all goes on one piece of paper, and then it's shared with there's actually 5 different organizations that are involved in our game day. It's the stadium, it's the city, it's the university where the parking lots are housed around us, it's the concessions company, and it's New Mexico. So it's all this communication. So I guess the short answer to your question is my job is all about communication and making sure that I'm communicating, whether that's showing appreciation, whether that's just double checking that we're on the same page and I'm not making an assumption, and then making sure that each department knows what the other departments are doing. Because so many times you'll send it to that person and forgot to send it to that one. That person then feels, why didn't he send me that? Am I not valued enough for him to? And then you can go down this road that just gets rid. So it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of emails. I think I get about 350 to 400 emails a day. And I'm OCD about my emails. And so I never end a day where there's still a scrolling arrow. We use Gmail. Where there's still a scrolling arrow, and I have a folder for everything. And so as soon as I've taken care of something, it goes in that folder. It goes in that folder. If I haven't taken care of it, it sits there, and then it bugs me. It bugs me till I've actually like taken care of it. And sometimes it's like a game of tennis, because it's like, all right, I got to send it to them, put it in the folder. It's going to come right back like 20 minutes later, and I got to send it to them. But if you'd ask my employees what they think I do, I think they would say he never stops sending emails, because I make sure that the communication is there. I always make sure that it's in writing. I learned that long ago. Don't ever put things verbally that you don't do in writing. But yeah, it's a lot of communication. I think it's a lot of, hopefully I do a good job. I can probably always do a better job of showing appreciation. And then on the game day itself, it's all about the fans. And so I'll start my game day usually morning and afternoon. Again, it's really hard. It's the last season I'd be there at 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. Peter asked me to take a step back, like let your people do their things. So I'll work from home, but I'm still going. I'm looking at SeatGeek, which is our ticketing platform, making sure things are doing right, checking in with our ticketing guy, checking with the box office. And I'm not there physically, but I'm there mentally. And then I'll mid-afternoon, I'll get there. I'll just do a quick walkthrough, look at how the grass is. Again, every game we bring in sod to cover the baseball diamond. So I go down and take a look. How bad is it tonight? Are we going to get complaints from the league or the refs or the other team on this? Then I'll walk around the concourse, make sure we got everything set up. We've got certain sponsors that are doing things that night. If there's a spell like this last game, we had an intern appreciation meeting. So we had a bunch of interns for the summer. We got them all jerseys with their name and number on the back as a thank you gift as they go back to school. So we did that meeting first. And then I have what's called our Behind the Shield tour, which is like it's like a VIP behind the scenes tour for people. Sponsors buy them, or people can buy a package. It comes with 4 tickets to the game. We walk you around the stadium as we're setting up the stadium and getting ready to open the gates. And then you end up on the field. You start in the press box. You see how the TV works, the radio. We talk about like last game, the TV was on ESPN Plus, locally on the ABC station. They were showing it in Louisville. The radio was on ESPN radio, and I think it was on Sirius XM as well. We showed people how all that works. Then they go down to the field and they walk around the field and they get to see stuff. And then after the game, they come down, meet players, stuff like that. So during the game, I don't really get to watch it. It's walking around, making sure Pete's in a good spot. He likes to spend the first 5 minutes in the supporter section, which is really cool. So our owner goes in the supporter section and sings and chants with them. I then go check on all our suites. There's 30 suites in Isotopes Park. So I'm going through and making sure everyone's in. This last game, we had a couple of issues with food and beverage that we had to make sure got cleared up. So I like to be there for that. So that way they're not thinking that no one's listening to them if they're complaining that there's something wrong. I'll stop by each of the tables that have sponsors at them. I'll stop by our merch stands to see how they're doing. We hire about 50 match day ambassadors, which are people that are just for the day of the game doing different things. So I always try my best to show them appreciation too. I mean, they're just working that a few hours that day, right? They don't have to do that. It's not a lot of money. So appreciation goes a long way with them. And then we have our United deck, which is kind of like our owner's box, but it's field level and open air. And we have, sometimes CEOs in there. So we had Jamie Tart in there 2 games ago. He was in town shooting a movie, Phil Dunster. We've had Bob Odenkirk from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad in there, and Patrick Fabian from Better Call Saul. We get a lot of actors that come to Albuquerque to film. We can get them to come to the game. That's a game day as well. So that's probably more than you bargained for there, but that's my week.
No, that's okay. That's perfect. That's kind of what I wanted to hear and see. I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost in the shuffle of what we're going on because everyone super passionately talks about the culture of the club and what they're doing and kind of what's going on outside of what they're actually doing to make that happen. So it's awesome when we get to hear and
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, I know want you to get on and enjoy some of your day off. We've been finishing up with some shorter answers. They don't always end up being shorter because sometimes there's
Try
just
my
a lot
best.
to say. But we'll finish up with some quicker ones. So first one, let's give some love to Albuquerque and New Mexico. When it's not a game day weekend, whether it's out of season or there's just no game on a given weekend, and you're not president for the day, how are you spending your weekend in Albuquerque?
So, 2 ways. One, doing absolutely nothing because we don't get many of those days. But I do have a 10-month-old now, so nothing is a relative term. But otherwise, I think traveling around this, we have a beautiful state. I think New Mexico is probably the most underappreciated state in the union because not a lot of people know about us. A couple weeks ago, we went up to Red River, New Mexico. Gorgeous, like mountains that in the winter you can ski. They got a great little microbrewery down there, great little walking trails and hiking trails. If you want to go fishing, you can go. It's just gorgeous. I mean, drive around this state. So many beautiful things. Couple lakes. They're not like Lake Michigan in Illinois or anything like that, but some beautiful lakes. We've got White Sands, which is down in southern New Mexico. We've got the Carlsbad Caverns, which is gorgeous. Ruidoso, which was just ravaged by these fires this year. But Ruidoso is a beautiful place. Santa Fe, full of rich art, culture. Taos, New Mexico, gorgeous place. Taos. We've actually played some games up there preseason, and our U23 teams played up there. So to answer your question, it's traveling around our beautiful state because I learned some lessons. I lived in Arizona for 8 years, and I don't think I saw the Grand Canyon until the 6th year. And sometimes it's the things that are like right in your backyard, you forget to actually go see. And so really learning to appreciate New Mexico. And even just here in Albuquerque, there's great places to hike and bike and do all that stuff. Can't do too much aggressive stuff with the baby. We'll get that as she gets a little older. But I like to spend my time enjoying New Mexico when I'm not sitting on the couch.
Nice. Yeah, no, sometimes you need that rest, but to your point, I don't think there's any rest of a 10-month-old.
There's not much. There's always a text message like there's 3 right now. There's always something. And that's what my wife tells me this too. I've got to do a better job of it. Is just leave that alone for a second and get to it, next. So gentlemen out there, be present with your family because it can be hard not to be sometimes.
Definitely. Well, next one. Looking back on your career so far, is there any specific moment, whether you personally or to do with any of the club you've been a part of, that you're most proud of? Just one specific achievement, moment, whatever that might be.
Part that I'm most proud of. That's a good one. I think it's probably I'll probably get emotional here, but I lost a very close friend of mine a couple years ago. And I knew him right when I moved to Albuquerque. I met him in 2004, 2005. And after attending his funeral, which was unexpected, I went to the celebration of life, and his family told me that they were burying him in a New Mexico United jersey. And they said that the club had meant that much to him that they wanted the shield to be on his heart for eternity. So when they when they told me that, I don't know if you could be much prouder than what you've built, because of what it meant to him and his family. So sorry, I wasn't expecting that question.
I think that is the perfect example of how you've built something that's bigger than any single person involved. It's not a person's business. It is New Mexico's vehicle of coming together. And that's a clear example of success right there that you can definitely be proud of.
Thank you.
The last one we can finish on and then wrap up is looking forward. And of course, David mentioned how successful the team is currently doing. What is one thing, and it might not be to do with New Mexico United. You do have a 10-month-old baby. What is one thing in the remainder of 2024 that you're most looking forward to happening?
The remainder of 2024 will be kissing that USL Championship trophy with Nadia in my arms. And then long term, in the next couple of years, will be building that stadium that we've been working on for a long time. So
great. Excellent. Well, it's a perfect blend of both worlds that clearly have both sides of your heart. So that's a perfect answer. Well, look, Ron, this has been amazing. Again, thank you so much for sharing your time, especially on a day off, sharing your insights, your stories, which were tremendous. We were really excited to have you on, given your very diverse background, at kind of all different levels and different parts of the game. So it's been awesome to hear your journey.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Keep doing what you're doing. Loving it.
Thanks for watching this episode of Off the Pitch. Don't forget to drop a follow or subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening from. That helps us bring stories like these to your ears each and every week. And if you have a minute, leave a review as well, as that helps us grow the Off the Pitch community and bring even more exciting guests on. See you in the next one.